Welcome to Weaving the Blanket, the Iguayu, stories of faith, sacrifice, martyrdom, and the emancipation of the Evangelical Methodist Church in Bolivia. This is Season 3, Episode 3, Benjamin Paredes, better known as Benjo, from communist to Methodist lay pastor to saint. My name is David Stevenson. In the last episode, I shared the story of how Ken, Sarah, and the 4 Corsons children got to Sapecho, Bolivia, to serve not as GBGM missionaries, but as regular IMB pastors. And I also told you that they had been warned that a dangerous, angry communist named Benjamin Paredes, better known as Benjo, would do all that he could to sabotage their work. The Corsons are about to have their first encounter with this man who hated Christians and hated North Americans. On August 2nd, 2014, I was in La Paz airport sending home a work team from Bolivia. I happened to notice a Bolivian young man who was obviously sending an American work team home also. After the two groups boarded the plane, I approached a young man whose name was Isaac and learned more about him. Isaac spoke excellent English and we had a great conversation. I found out that Isaac was a Methodist, and it was a Methodist team that he and his dad had brought down to work on a then unknown to me Methodist project called CFAT, S-I-F-A-T, Servants in Faith and Technology. Isaac heard of me, but I hadn't heard of him. CFAT is an approved advanced special of the United Methodist Church, but it is not under the direction of the United Methodist Church. In fact, it's an independent interdenominational mission started by Ken and Sarah Corsons. Check out the bonus episode on CFAT to get a better understanding of CFAT's work and its independence from and cooperation with the United Methodist Church and other denominations and nonprofits. It's a remarkable organization. You really should check out the bonus podcast. We sat down and had some coca tea, and somehow I mentioned the 1980 coup and the arrest of Methodists across the country. And he said he too was arrested. I said, "No way! You're way too young to have been arrested." And Isaac responded that he was a 9-year-old boy and was in church on that fateful Thursday evening, July 17, 1980, when his dad was preaching, and they arrested him. When I heard this, I asked if I could possibly meet his father. The young man said, "Sure, Dad is in town with me today. Want to meet at Ellie's for pizza?" "Absolutely. It'd be an honor." I told him that I hope one day to write a book about the lives of some of the Bolivian Methodists, and I'd like to include his dad in the book. The young man said, "Great, let's meet at Ellie's for pizza at noon." That's how I met the incredible Benjo. We sat for 3 hours as I listened to this amazing life story. I was blown away by his story, and his son, who interpreted the conversation for us, sat there wide-eyed as he heard for the first time in his life the amazing story of his father. I took careful, copious notes of this story, and that's the one I want to share with you now. Benjamin Paredes Vargas, better known as Benjo, grew up in the small town of Quisampuco in the Potosi Department, or state, of Bolivia in 1940. Quisampuco was your typical small Bolivian town in 1940. No potable water, no electricity, no school. When Benjo reached 10 years old, his mother became extremely ill during the time around Christmas, and she called young Benjo to her bed and said, "Don't ever forget about God." And she died the next day. And this charge would forever influence Benjo's life. Benjo and his brothers and sisters were split up, and sent out to live with aunts and uncles and cousins and other family members, and Benjo was sent to live with an aunt and an uncle who already had several children. The uncle was a mine worker. You may remember what a dangerous, underpaid job that was from the episode in Season 1 entitled Cerro Rico, the Mountain That Eats Men. But at least his uncle had a steady, if inadequate, income. And Benjo was welcomed into the family, and his cousins played with him and treated him fair. One year, just before Christmas, 2 workers from the mines came to visit the family where Benjo lived. The children all lined up, and the workers gave out toys to each of the children as Christmas gifts from the mine owner. These gifts are from baby Jesus as we prepare to celebrate his birthday, they were told. But when they finished, the workers realized that they had given out too many gifts. Then they discovered that Benjo was a nephew, not a son, of the man who worked in the mine. And the miners left the gift for his cousins, but they took his gift from him, leaving him with nothing. And it broke the little boy's heart. He thought, why doesn't Jesus love all the children, not just some of the children? His cousins could go to the mine-run school, but since he was not the child of a miner, he could not attend. Consequently, since he couldn't go to school and there really wasn't enough income to feed and care for the whole family, there was nothing left for Benjo to do but to look for a job. So at 11 years old, he found a job turning a large pump that mixed large vats of soda pop. 11 years old. He stood by other men who also cranked pumps, doing the same job that they did, but he received a child's wage, less than a fourth of what those men made. And he realized, there is no justice for me. But he remembered his mother's statement to always remember God. So he looked for a church to attend, and there was this great Roman Catholic church in their town. It was a beautiful church building up on a hill, and the women of the church all wore the most beautiful dresses with veils. They looked like angels. They looked like what he imagined his mom looked like in heaven. He joined a little band of street children who would gather around the women as they came out of the church just to be near these beautiful spiritual beings. But the women pushed the children aside, ignoring them and clearly annoyed by their presence. And again he felt, no justice, no love for me. He even tried a small Protestant church, but everything was in Spanish and he couldn't understand as he only spoke Quechua. When he was about 13 or 14, Benjo was invited to a meeting by one of his friends. At the meeting, speaking in Quechua, a man talked about the injustices in the world. And the people in that group kind of included him and treated him as an equal, as an adult, which he already really was at 14. And they let him know that he was important. And they showed him that the evil and injustices in the world that he'd experienced came from Hispanic Bolivians who cared nothing for the indigenous people. And they taught him how the root of all this injustice lay in the United States. It was the Yankees, the gringos, who owned the mines, spread the injustice, yanking away everything good that would come to the poor, just as they had yanked away his Christmas present. The group were Trotskyites, the harshest division of the Communist Party in Bolivia. Benjo told me, quote, here were people who knew what my life was like. Here were people who have experienced what I have experienced. Here were people, my people, who treated me like an equal and can explain why the world is filled with injustice. It all comes from the hated gringos. At 14, he had to be careful. If his bosses knew he was a member of the Communist Party, they would fire him, or worse. He knew jail or even execution was a possibility because he was a part of a group that wanted to improve his life. It was additional proof of the rightness of the communist teachings. All they wanted was justice, but to speak about justice is to face jail and execution. He was taught about the impending war that was coming between the United States and its puppets against the masses of people in the world. So at 15, he forged a birth certificate so he could join the army. He did this because he wanted to be trained in shooting weapons and organizing for the upcoming war. After basic training, he was assigned to guard the Wani Mining Center. While there, he realized that he had no education.
He couldn't speak Spanish very well.
He didn't know very much. But there were no opportunities for schooling, not even for a soldier. So, Benjamin started his own school. He organized some students, found a teacher, and declared himself president of the student body. Mind you, this is not a teacher organizing their own school, but a student organizing a school so he could learn. As soon as he was out of the army, once again he was unemployed and broke. So he organized a syndicate of unemployed workers, and they marched on La Paz, and there he was able to find work for many of those who were in the syndicate. But no one wanted to hire the organizer, the rabble-rouser, who organized this group. Broke, with no job, he heard about the government program to give land to those who would homestead in the Alto Beni. The Alto Beni is in the eastern part of Bolivia and is part of the Amazon jungle. So in 1962, he moved to Sapecho in the Alto Beni. Here was a place he could organize. Here was a place where he could easily wage war on the oppressors and hide and live in the jungle of the Alto Beni.
So Benjo was in one of the first group of persons to homestead in Sapecho. There was no town, no stores, no church, no school, only jungle with a marker saying this is to become Sapecho. There was a bamboo hut near there where the government dropped off bags of rice and beans once a month, which they floated down the river in rafts to the area. That way the homesteaders would have something to eat until they had time to plant a garden and harvest their own food. The government gave each man in the group 25 acres as a homestead. Benjo didn't publicly say he was a communist, because to do so would mean he would be arrested and probably executed. But he worked hard to help all the people, so they began to come to him with their problems. He wanted to help them so that he could become a leader and lead them into helping him fight for justice for the poor. The people knew he was a rebel against the government, and many folks within the community knew that he was a communist. But they needed a leader who could help them to survive the wilderness and survive the lack of basic needs those first few months as they began to build the village of Sapecho. So they elected him mayor of Sapecho. And later, Benjo was arrested several times when Bolivia had right-wing military dictators. They feared that he would organize opposition. Now, Benjo had a cousin who was a part of the first group who built and settled in Sapecho.
The cousin was a Christian and invited him to attend the Methodist Church. So Benjo decided to go to mock this God who didn't care about the poor. After all, if there's a God, why is there so much poverty and injustice? So he would occasionally go just to mock the mythology of God. In 1976, during one of these excursions to mock the myth, the leader of the church said that a missionary was going to come and live and work in the community. And to make things worse, the missionary was an American. Now, when the church completed the bamboo hut for them to live in, the Corsons had to move all of their stuff 12 miles from kilometer 73 to Sapecho. I'm going to let Sarah Corson describe what happened next.
So then we were going to have to move, and we didn't have that much, but we had more than we could carry, having to walk part way. And so the church lent us a Jeep for a week when we were moving. So we had transportation to go back and forth and get what we needed and get set up. And Ken was coming from the shopping center, Port Galena, the 10 miles, and he had just started, and there was an indigenous man walking in the road with a 100-pound bag of potatoes on his back, and all bent over with it, and it was a really hot day, and it was middle of the day in the sun, and it was Benjo. Ken always stopped. He never passed anybody. If he had a vehicle, he'd stop and offer a ride. And he stopped and said, "Do you want to ride?" And Benjo rode with him, and that's when they got acquainted. But we had no idea what happened in Benjo's mind until years later, when he had come to the States, and CFET had been invited to speak over in Mississippi, in Meridian, and we had taken Benjo to give his testimony. And I didn't know what he was going to say, but I was translating for him. And that's when I found out what happened. So I'll tell you the story from Benjo's point of view, as I found out as I was translating it for this big audience full of people. He said, "I was so hot and tired, but I couldn't make 2 trips and bring in more, and I needed potatoes for my family for a while, and so I was trying to get home with that bag of potatoes, and here this Jeep stopped, and I looked up into the face of this white face with this big white beard, because Ken quit shaving down there. It was too hard to shave with cold water, and he grew a beard down there. And he said, I looked up into the face of this white American, and he represented everything I hated. He was the missionary that had come to our town, and I was furious that they had come. When I heard it, I wanted to stop it, but I didn't have any way to. And he said, I wanted to just sock him in the face. But he said to me, I'm going to Sapecho, do you want to ride? And I wanted to say no, I wanted to spit on him. But instead, I looked at the sun, and it was so hot, and the load was so heavy. And I thought, well, I can stand it that far. So he put the potatoes in and got in with him. Ken said, I'm your new preacher in Sapecho. And he said, I know you are. And he was expecting Ken to hit him over the head with the Bible, so to speak, and start telling him he thought Ken would know about him and his communism things. Ken asked him, he said, well, we've come to see if we can do anything to help the town develop. You've just been a town for 16 years. And Ken said, if I can help in any way, well, what do you think the town needs the most? And Benjo told the church, I was shocked. No American ever cared what we thought our town needed. They just told us what it needed. And I was shocked he was asking me that. And I didn't have an answer for him. I was just hadn't thought about what I would say. We needed everything. And Ken said, well, I noticed we don't have clean water, and we really do need potable water. And he said, didn't I know that? I know babies die every week there in Sapecho because of little children that start to drink the water. He said, yes, we need clean water. And Ken said, well, we might write a grant proposal. We might be able to get that if you all want to work on that. And he said, well, nobody will listen to us. We're just Indians. And Ken said, oh, I think we can find the right people. We'll go to the United Nations. And then Benjo said, hey, this man really wants to help us. Wow, I've never known a white person, and especially a Christian, to care, because he'd known the Christians that claimed to be Christians, went to the church in the mining town, the head of the mines, just for social reasons, so people would think they were good. And they really oppressed the workers, and that was what he thought Christianity was. by the time they got to Sapecho, he had changed his mind about Ken. And he thought, this is our hope for our town. This guy can lead us. He will bypass us and go to the UN or some other place to get help. We've got to stick with him.
We're going to stop there for now, but in our next episode, we'll learn about the continuing partnership between Benjo and Ken and Sarah working in Sapecho. We'll hear about Benjo's conversion when he's all alone on a starry, starry night. And we will find out where Benjo and his son Isaac, Tom and Sarah Corson and their children, where everyone is on the fateful night of July 17th, 1980.